One of Smash's more popular fighters, despite having modest tier placements throughout his career, has always been Ness, a character with a rather interesting set of moves that belie their extremely strong practical use cases, which has only gotten more pronounced with every passing iteration of the game. Beginning in Super Smash Bros. Brawl though, a second character from the Earthbound universe was released, Lucas, who possesses many of the same psychic abilities as Ness. In the eyes of most players back in the day, the blonde boy was mostly regarded as an echo fighter of the Snapback Kid, but following his reinstitution as a DLC fighter in Smash 4 and then later his inclusion in Ultimate, the two protagonists have since diverged in terms of movesets, having fairly distinct playstyles from each other. But while Ness has only trended upwards over time, Lucas has instead gone the other direction. They were once joined to each other at the hip, but now Lucas is one of the more obscure characters in Smash, with his only real notable performance coming from Regalo during his miracle run at Super Smash Con 2022. Curiously though, he has no shortage of extremely powerful moves across his toolkit, yet somehow he's considered weak or underwhelming in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot to break down with him, so I figure for the next episode of this series we'll be talking about why no one plays Lucas. Having said just now that Lucas and Ness were practically next to each other all around, that was true in Brawl and Smash 4. Even though back then there were enough nuances between the two, in practice, Ness and Lucas were more or less the same, at least in terms of how to deal with them. Ultimate's Ness and Lucas though are definitively unassociated from each other at this point, with their respective repertoires having even more differences in properties than Luigi and Mario. On that note, we should probably start with Lucas's moveset, which I think is a shining demonstration of how strong moves alone don't necessarily decide a character's practical strength. The interesting thing is that Lucas has several top-tier moves individually, and when trying to visualize the priorities of a strong character, depending on who you ask, you would think he checks off many boxes to at the very least be a solid mid or high tier right alongside Ness. Frankly speaking, his attacks are incredible in a vacuum, and would easily be the subject of envy to his peers. For that matter, he has a ton of versatile attacks that can cover specific situations that the vast majority of the cast cannot, with only few of them coming at the cost of general usability. Forward tilt is a quick strike in front of him with a rather large disc joint relative to his size, angled downward it can easily reach below the stage, making it a strong 2-frame option, and it's also one of the safest forward tilts on shield at -8. That's if your opponent's even close enough to hit him with how much range it has, and it works as a respectable kill option to boot. Up tilt isn't the most notable attack in his toolkit, but with the frame 4 startup that scoops on both sides, it can combo into itself at low percents, and then into a neutral or up air afterwards for good damage. Down tilt is a frame 3 leg sweep that can chain into itself much like how you can with Ness and Rob, and it can also work as a combo sequence into other attacks like his jab, forward tilt, forward air, or grab. While dash attack isn't all that fast, not only does it possess very good disjointed range and respectable kill power, but the sweet spot's -12 on shield, one of the safest dash attacks in the game. What makes it better than it should be though, is that Lucas has several ways to combo into it, making it for the slow startup. Forward smash is a frame 14 baseball swing, although instead of an actual baseball bat like the one Ness has, it's just a stick, making it less powerful in damage and knockback, but much faster, allowing you to reflect projectiles on reaction more easily than if you were playing Ness. Down smash is one of his most notorious attacks, a down-facing triple explosion growing in size each time with the hitbox so massive it makes 2-framing practically guaranteed. Widely considered one of the best edge guarding tools and most certainly the best edge guarding down smash in the game. It also happens to be -12, which makes it quite safe even on shield. Neutral air is a multi-hit body spark that has many of the same applications as other multi-hit nairs of this variety, including looping into itself or drag down combos, though compared to the likes of Palutena, it's nowhere near as consistent in this regard. But those drag downs can still sequence into his powerful grounded options. Forward air is a reasonably fast, disjointed, strong, and extremely safe poking tool that when spaced and sweet spotted is completely unpunishable on shield. The strong hit in particular is reminiscent of his forward tilt where he can reliably kill opponents near the ledge. The rest of his aerials are situationally respectable too, especially his up air, being another one of those near unpunishable aerials on shield and even comboing into itself like most up airs do. Accentuating Lucas's versatility is his special moveset. Compared to PK Flash, PK Freeze is a far more dangerous neutral B to watch out for since when sufficiently charged is effectively a death knell to any opponent without a strong, and I emphasize strong mash game, or someone with a bad recovery. Obviously PK Freeze can only be used for edge guarding or an advantage state due to the long startup. PK Fire lacks the same combo setup as Ness, but it makes up for it by being an explosion upon contact, with fairly decent size and knockback. It should be noted that trying to attack the projectile will still result in the explosion, making it unwise for you to challenge it as you're more than likely to receive damage anyway. The knockback angle also makes it quite good for edge guarding opponents with poor horizontal recovery, and when used in the air, Lucas gets pushed back, essentially making it an auto space and or movement mix-up. Lucas's PK Thunder is by far the best gimping tool in the entire game. It doesn't disappear on contact with an opponent like Ness's, rather it continuously damages the target like a multi-hit with ambiguous knockback timings, and it's also a transcendent projectile so you can't attack it to get rid of it. Against most characters with linear recoveries, the only way to survive a PK Thunder edge guard is if the Lucas player messes up. Finally, PSI Magnet. Lucas lacks many of the downbeat techs that Ness is famous for, but the discharge effect upon ending the move sends at a horrible angle, virtually horizontal, and it also has a vacuum hitbox while being neutral on shield, aka -0. One last thing is his grab game. Though his grounded grab has an abysmal startup of frame 12, it has fairly decent range being a tether grab and connects into any one of his impressive throws. For one, Lucas has 3 kill throws, forward, back, and up throws, so if you get grabbed by him at 150%, you're basically screwed no matter where you are on stage. Meanwhile, down throw can lead into a few early percent combos as well. But what makes his tether grab a bitch and a half to deal with is Zaire, which has a frame 9 startup and is -2 on shield. Combine that with his double jump cancel tech, Lucas can bridge combo you across the entire stage and subsequently throw you off of it, where he can then try to end your soul with his extensive arsenal of edge guarding, two framing, and gimping tools. Therein lies his greatest strength, edge guarding, potentially top 5 or even top 3 throughout Ultimate's entire roster. From down smash to forward tilt to PK freeze to PK fire to PK thunder, he has no shortage of ways to keep you off stage, none of which coming at any cost or risk to himself, as he can perform these attacks while standing comfortably at the ledge, whereas for most others, it's either a 50-50 or a risk of going off stage themselves. He also has a few ways to throw you off stage to start the whole interaction as well. I already mentioned the Zaire strings he can do, which, if executed perfectly, is a true combo, and with this number of horizontal attacking moves like PK fire, forward and back throw, and forward air having decent base knockback, it's not that difficult for him to push you over the edge. Adding on to that, Lucas's early to mid% combo game is on par with most of the cast, as he can chain multiple strings together for an easy 0 to 60. Having said all these positive things about the character, it begs the question, why is Lucas so unpopular? And more importantly, why is he considered a low mid tier if he has such brainless edge guarding, a ton of situationally useful tools, and good damage output among other things? What's exactly missing from his repertoire? The simplest way to answer that is, Lucas is a prime example of a character whose poor representation and performance has less to do with what he has and more what he prioritizes. Back in my Why Everyone Plays Ness video, I talked about how if other conventional generalist characters have ABC strengths, Ness has XYZ. Continuing off that analogy, because those strengths are connected to each other sequentially, it makes Ness a very intuitive character to play with obvious points of strength. Lucas also possesses multiple letters, possibly even more than just 3. The problem is, they're not exactly synchronous with each other, so he would be like DHLQSW. He has 6 letters, but they're all spread apart from each other, placing the onus on the player using him to assess the individual assets of his toolkit and make the combinations himself, rather than those combinations being already put together for them. In other words, he has a bunch of tools, but they're not organized in a way that makes their value immediately accessible to the player. Furthermore, these strengths may be missing vital aspects to coverage due to only being 1 letter as opposed to groups of 3 letters. So while Lucas does have a versatile arsenal of tools, those tools end up being very specific, uncompromisingly so. To give you an example, let's go back to his edge guarding. As stated before, Lucas has twice or even thrice the edge guarding of most characters, but the same tools and combos he uses to edge guard are not the same tools and combos used to get his opponent off stage to begin with. Pikachu's edge guarding is quite strong thanks to a number of multi-hits, great off-stage movement, and ways of restricting his opponent's avenues of recovery. But the same moves he uses to edge guard like forward air, back air, T-jolt, and stuff are the same attacks he uses on stage to get them off stage in the first place. So he can just continue his on-stage game into his off-stage game, with maybe an extra move or 2 added onto it. There's not that much difference from part 1 to part 2. Edge guarding for Lucas is practically brain dead, but getting his opponent to part 2 is where things can get tricky. Unlike other zoners who have attacks and projectiles of practical on-stage applications, as well as off-stage, PK Freeze and Thunder are practically unusable in a neutral setting, forcing you to get creative with how you can win neutral, especially against characters who can either maneuver around you or just outrange you overall. That is where the issue is. Lucas has tools that are amazing for edge guarding, but they're only for edge guarding, not for anything else. The inverse is also true as well. Lucas's Zaire is great for bridge comboing or setting up into a throw, but that same Zaire is not really much of an edge guarding tool in and of itself compared to Samus, whose Zaire can be used to poke enemies on stage or to gimp off stage. Speaking of Samus, her charge shot is an on-stage and off-stage threat all in one. In his defense, despite his movement being compartmentalized, Lucas is by no means an impractical character. Like I said, his close quarters game can rack up a ton of damage and put his opponent into disadvantage to where he can then abuse them, but with no easy way to approach opponents himself, he has to rely almost entirely on them coming to him. And though Zaire and PK Fire are certainly capable of forcing approaches, it's not sufficient enough at doing so against other characters with a reason to camp, or not approach themselves. Part of what makes moves like Charge Shot, Sun Salutation, Aura Sphere, and Shadow Ball such a threat is that they can kill, which is why you have no choice but to go after Samus. Getting hit by PK Fire sucks, but it's not a kill projectile, it's only for getting you off stage. I suppose in a way you can think of fighting Lucas as a touch of death character, wherein if he gets going, you're gonna get thrown off stage and never come back, but as you know, the universal weakness of touch of death characters is their susceptibility to getting walled or zoned out. This is of course made up for by you getting completely fucked if they do get in, but Lucas is not a touch of death character, far from it. He's dependent on edge guarding to a fault. Though he does have strong attacks, a good knockback like forward tilt and forward air, trying to win through stray hits in neutral is just not an option for him. And so if he's caught in a situation where he has to try and win too many on-stage interactions, he won't. The usefulness of his 3 kill throws is diminished by how difficult it is for him to get a grab on you in neutral. In fact, it's difficult for him to get his hands on you at all if you're playing a character with better movement physics or evasion, making the likelihood of winning via stray hits even more cumbersome. The main way for Lucas to overcome these hurdles is by coming up with as many creative mix-ups and or combo strings as you can, one of which being the double jump cancels air strings that what few Lucas players there are have become quite efficient at. However, a high learning curve is often a turnoff for prospective players, particularly when there are far simpler options out there. Essentially, Lucas is a very two-part character. Part 1 is to get you off stage, and part 2 is to keep you off stage. Though he's given adequate tools to achieve part 1 and unequivocally part 2, the very fact that he has to go through 2 parts to beat you can be a detriment in and of itself, because that's one more chance your opponent has to reset back to neutral. Granted, Lucas's edge guarding is so stupid unfair you have like a 10% chance of getting back to stage depending on the character, but 10% is higher than 0%. A significant number of characters just won't give you that opportunity in the first place. Edge guarding is a big component of Ultimate, yes, but right now the current meta is either ledge trapping, which Lucas is really vulnerable to despite his fairly good recovery, or killing you outright on stage. There are so many part 1 characters in Smash that can achieve a similar, if not better, end result than Lucas. From a combo perspective, Lucas's air strings can send you off stage where he can then edge guard you, or you can play Mario, Rob, or Meta Knight, whose bridge combos do the carrying you off stage and killing part at the same time. Rob's 0 to death with gyro setups begin on stage, but once he gets you off stage, he doesn't have to switch gears and work on killing you from there. He just keeps pressing the same buttons and then kills you. Jigglypuff can fair and nair string you across the stage and then keep fair and nairing you off stage. So while Lucas is trying to focus on getting you off stage, everyone else is focusing on trying to just kill you. I think the ultimate reason why Lucas is unpopular despite having a fairly respectable arsenal is because the best part of him is not always accessible to you during a match. It's very similar to Lucario's predicament actually, where the best part of him becomes less appealing when you realize it's not available right from the start, whereas the strengths of more popular characters are accessible at all times. Lucas has to unlock that strength and then continuously unlock it over and over again, which makes him a very execution heavy character in a field of combat that isn't the most valued right now. If we were in a meta favoring edge guards, then he'd be a lot stronger, but for the past 2 years, we've been in a very on-stage focused meta where people just die in neutral. Basically, in the context of the current landscape of Ultimate, Lucas's priorities are opposite to what most people value right now. In a vacuum, he's a great character, but in relativity, he feels more like a gimmicky version of other members of his niche, like Ness. Ness is Lucas, but more straightforward while still having a lot of room for skill expression. What do you guys think about Lucas? Do you agree with the points I made, or do you think there's something else I neglected to mention? Feel free to share in the comments. That's going to be it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Second time he does not match out of one of those spots. Off throw should take it up, guide him to the skies, and Regalo continues his run here at Smash Gun, taking out Chucky Kong.